Warning: all views expressed in this video are from the creator and do not represent the opinions of any other company or individual. Content shown within is intended for entertainment purposes only, and no infringement is intended. Enjoy!
Hey there, this is Perch, and what we're going to do now is review Solo Avengers. So let me explain for a moment what I'm going to do with reviews. We'll do classic comics, we'll do new comics, but mostly I want to review some titles that were uniquely different, something that maybe you don't hear a lot of, you haven't been reviewed to death by a million other people, but are just kind of bring something unique to the comic industry, something that we haven't seen for a while, or maybe we've seen, but not in the same way. So today we're going to do Solo Avengers. And Solo Avengers, this is issue number 1 with Hawkeye and Mockingbird. And so let me give a little bit of background about what's going on in Marvel at the time. It's 1987, late 1987. And the mutants are what's going on. So you've got Fall of the Mutants is the big event that's coming up. And X-Men sells incredibly well everywhere. And there's big status quo going to change there. And but at the same time, they are trying to do some things with West Coast Avengers and with a lot of other titles outside of the X-Men to kind of broaden the line. So it's not like it's X-Men and nothing, but most of the attention certainly went to the mutant side of the Marvel Universe. So Solo Avengers comes out, and the idea, the pitch for it back then was kind of, Hawkeye's got more adventures to tell that go beyond West Coast Avengers, so we're going to tell some of his stories in half the comic, and then the other half of the comic will feature, an Avenger that doesn't have a solo issue. So we're not going to do Captain America or Iron Man. We're going to do characters that can't carry their own titles and just do something a little different. Okay, so right off the bat, we got a pretty iconic cover, and you just wait till you see what's actually going on here. It's gonna blow your mind. So first of all, 1987, 75 cents comic. There's been a lot of comments about how inflation, comics today are really just keeping up with inflation. Well, for the record, according to U.S. inflation calculator, this comic would cost $1.67 today. So, just saying, it's a little bit cheaper than what you can find on the stands. But we've got a really nice cover here, Mark Bright, and jumping right in, Tom DeFalco, our writer, and Mark Bright, our penciler for our main issue. And this scene of Hawkeye riding the horse with a bow and arrow is pretty much been on T-shirts and posters. This is a much reprinted piece of art for quite a long time. And we got kind of a jokey story. Hawkeye is getting ready to do some work for an orphanage, and it's going to be an exhibition of his amazing talents and talk a little bit about his backstory. They don't spend a lot of time. Like most comics today that do the solo adventure, they want to spend 4 or 5 issues. I meant pages, but actually probably in today's decompression, and issues is more like it, of backstory and, here's the thing you didn't know, if dad was an alien, whatever. But no, it's pretty much just a couple panels. We get some backstory of the swordsman and what's going on. All this is, of course, foreshadowing what's going to come with Hawkeye, and they're bringing back a classic villain, basically. So, we get some plot here of, some villain who's super out of shape, but he's training with some guys and some toys that look like they're Nerf would make them, but apparently they're bad. And they're gonna grab Hawkeye and they're gonna cause some mayhem. So right off the bat, now, here's something interesting. So there's 2 stories in this one comic. One with Hawkeye, and then the backup Avenger is going to be Mockingbird, which is of course his wife and a core character to Hawkeye. Both of them are at this point a team. We hadn't gone into the whole Phantom Ghost, rape nonsense that would come later on in Mockingbird. If you have no idea what I'm just talking about, we'll get there eventually as one of the goofier things that occurred in comics. But so Hawkeye comes out to do his little exhibition, and lo and behold, the clowns that were supposed to kind of just joke around with him have been replaced with killers, and they're just going to murder him straight up, just kill him off. So Hawkeye, immediately springs into action, starts shooting people. We get to see some trick arrows and Hawkeye being Hawkeye. And then what's one of the funnier aspects of this comic is Hawkeye's bow gets basically smashed. And so Hawkeye shows, hey, I don't actually need a bow at all. My specialty is hurling projectiles. So, and he just starts chucking arrows with his bare hands at people and pins them to the wall and everything else. Which basically we're saying here that Hawkeye is Bullseye as a character. But, that's fine. But Hawkeye, fins off the bad guys, and the crowd's loving it. They think it's all a joke or part of the show. And Mockingbird reconnects them. She's all beat up, and we're going to find out what happened to her in a minute. But clearly there's a mystery here, and the mystery is going to carry on for several other issues. And I spoke too soon. We're promised the real origin of Hawkeye, but it's not a retelling. There's not a big psych moment in his history. It's just introducing some more people to his cast. So that's the first issue, or the first half of the issue. Pretty solid Hawkeye story. Some interesting things going on. The storytelling is nice and crisp. We get, Hawkeye showing why he's an impressive character. He's never defenseless. Even when you take away his bow, he's still just as deadly, which begs the question why he uses the bow in the first place. But, be that as it may. So this issue was this part of the issue was all Mark Bright pencils. Looks incredible. Joe Rubenstein doing some of the finished art, but really just classic Mark Bright showing why he was such an amazing talent in the 80s and doing a lot of really amazing things with characters. Of course, known for doing a lot with Iron Man, but absolutely incredible work. So then we get to the second story, and we jump right in. It's Mockingbird, and holy smokes, it's Jim Lee. This is Jim Lee doing the pencils here. And so just pausing for a moment, we've seen the AVX, A+X. We've seen lots of solo. We just had a relaunched Marvel Comics Presents. So there's this idea of these kind of mini stories within a comic are still going strong today. They keep reviving it. But what's impressive here, and actually if you go back and look at the original Marvel Comics Presents, they were bringing out a talent. It wasn't fill-in artists or artists that were, just kind of up and coming in their careers. I mean, certainly a lot of these guys were new, but they were clearly well-vetted, nicely polished people. And you had a lot of good artists come in here, a lot of kind of big names. You had Greg Capullo, you had Dave Cockrum, you had the very first work of Amanda Connor came in Solo Avengers back in with a Yellow Jacket story. But if you go back and you look at all the different artists that came in and contributed to this, it's just a kind of a who's who of pretty impressive people. Lee Weeks, Jim Valentino, and just an amazing amount of people. But this comic, the second half, is all about Mockingbird. So this is kind of what I want to draw people's attention to in this story, is that this comic is two different tales, but the tales are kind of telling the same story, or at least the same timeline. We've got Hawkeye getting ready for his thing. We've got Mockingbird, who was shown leaving Hawkeye earlier in the Hawkeye story, and now she's off on her own. And so we're going to see kind of the same, what was going on with her. So there was a lot of nice coordination. I mean, Tom DeFalco wrote both parts of the story, but you got a sense of kind of two perspectives in one adventure, which is pretty cool. And it's a technique that you don't see much of anymore. And why? It's a fairly, especially if you have the same writer, it's an easy one to carry off. It allows for some real depth to what is a pretty mundane story. Hawkeye's going to do an exhibition here, but we've got a little bit of Mockingbird's backstory. We've got some, again, wonderful illustration by Jim Lee. Hey, look at all this. The characters are consistent. It shows Mockingbird coming in and finding the clowns that were supposed to work the show completely rolled, and here are the villains who have done it. And they're wearing the same outfits. They got the same weapons. There's coordination. It's like some writer or editor actually took the time to make sure that this all told one cohesive story. And again, this is Solo Avengers. It's not the main core West Coast Avengers title. It's an offshoot book, but it's a book that they wanted to do well. So you go through all this, and Mockingbird is trying to uncover what's going on. It's referencing some of her spy background, and she's got to figure out what's happening. But she knows that Hawkeye can take care of herself, so she's going to go and take care of her side. She catches up with some of the guys who fled the scene, and wrecks the van and saves the hostage, and more goons come at her, and she's jumping around. And again, you got some really nice Jim Lee artwork. This is kind of pre-X-Men, of course, But you're seeing the guy who was going to become a legend right here. There's obviously early work, but still, it's very tight, very crisp, and you're seeing a little bit more of the mysterious, shadowy villain that's going to come to pass, and it's good stuff. So she saves a whole giant explosion from a flaming arrow. That's going to, again, kind of foreshadow the villain that's going to come. But it's a nice story. She reunites with Hawkeye. They both took care of business in their own ways. So you got two Avengers, married couple, both having separate adventures, both kind of trying to solve the same mystery. And there's the comic. So a lot going on here. You got a pretty full story for what was a monthly comic. And that was Solo Avengers. So that's how they kicked it off. Again, the split books are a tradition at Marvel. You go back to Tales of Astonish and a lot of the original characters, the Hulk and Captain America, Spider-Man, these all came out of these kinds of stories that were, collections of characters all doing something. So this was, there's a little word at the end by Mark Grunwald talking about kind of the vision of what he's trying to do. And a little bit of what I said already, wanting to give some heroes a chance to shine in the spotlight. And there's a little tease of all the different characters that they're gonna have. When I was young and this comic came out, I remember picking it up and thinking that this was just amazing. I didn't have a big affinity for Avengers, like I think most of the audience. I was all into X-Men at that point. But this was a chance to see some characters I was curious about, and what does a Wonder Man story look like? What does a Mantis story look like? What does a Captain Marvel, Monica Captain Marvel in this case during the time period look like? So this was going to be pretty interesting, and the quality of the issue was good. They brought good talent on. They have a story that's compelling. Again, the complexity of the two stories coming together is unique, and you don't see that very much anymore. So a nice story, a good read. Solo Avengers. Like I said, it would go on for about, it changed its name. So it went on for about 20 issues, I believe, and then it went on for another 20 or so under a new name, Avengers Spotlight. So kind of ran from 87 to about 90, 91, kind of that time period. And usually always two stories. A couple times they cheated a little bit, but very nice monthly book. Really helped kind of flesh out the Avengers, and there's plot lines that are still referenced today. So some really nice stuff, and highly recommended. It's a bit hard to find now. If you're going to go and try and look it up in shops, especially because of the Jim Lee aspect, it's probably pretty expensive. You're going to struggle finding it a little bit, but this would be a great example of an anthology book that Marvel should reprint or get back in the hands of fans, because it really is some good stuff. Anyway, there you go. There's a title doing a little bit of a different thing. Certainly in contrast to current comics, I can talk about kind of the current attempts to kind of pull off the same magic, and they never seem to stick. And certainly part of it's a creative talent they're bringing. Currently, the publishers, particularly Marvel, uses these books as a chance to try new creators, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's good to get some new people into the mix, but it also speaks to the audience. I think if you're trying to do some new creators and give them a chance to shine, and you're charging $4 an issue for it, it's a harder sell. At 75 cents, as you saw with the inflation earlier, about $1.60 now. That model would work today for an anthology book with some new people, but again, at $4, that's kind of a tough sell. So it points out all the more how things are different today, and frankly, I'm not trying to just bag on modern comics. There's a reason why they're doing what they're doing today, and they've got a different model at play. But you read issues like this one, and it really does make you miss some of the magic that was brought out, both with the creative talent, but also with the storytelling approach. That it was a story that, as you're reading it, you feel like this isn't core to the main book, but you also feel like it matters. It doesn't feel like a comic that's just going to, be forgotten in 5 or 10 years or 2 years. And the adventure seems meaningful. We are using both Hawkeye and Mockingbird here. They're pulling together with something. There's a promise. And they did deliver on that promise that this would kind of redefine a little bit of Hawkeye and what he was all about. and give him some people in his background who trained him and made him the man he is. So some really interesting stuff. If you got a chance, check it out. But there you go. There's kind of a unique comic, and thanks for listening.